Haldor, a name whispered on the icy winds of the north, carried from village to village, from the highest peaks to the deepest valleys. A name synonymous with strength and honor, revered by his people and feared by his enemies. His eyes, blue as the glacial fjords, had seen the harsh beauty of his homeland and the brutality of war. They had witnessed the rise and fall of many, the bloodshed and the glory. He was a Viking warrior raised in the tradition of courage and loyalty, trained from a young age to wield the axe and shield, to sail the longboats and to honor the gods. His heart bound to the code of his ancestors, a code that valued bravery, honor and the bonds of kinship above all else. Klaus. A name uttered with fear and resentment, a name that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. A name that cast a long shadow across the land, a shadow that grew darker and more oppressive with each passing day. His reign began with promises of prosperity, of a brighter future for all, but those promises were quickly broken, replaced by the harsh reality of his tyranny. He ruled with an iron fist, his heart cold, his ambition boundless, his cruelty unmatched. He crushed any who dared to oppose him, leaving a trail of fear and suffering in his wake. The people lived in constant fear, their spirits broken, their hopes shattered, but even in the darkest times there were whispers of resistance, of a hero who would rise to challenge the tyrant. Their worlds were destined to collide, two forces on a path to an inevitable confrontation. Haldor, bound by oath to serve his king, found himself on the front lines of a war he didn't seek, a war that would test his courage, his loyalty, and his very soul. Klaus, driven by an insatiable hunger for power, marched his armies across the land, leaving a trail of misery and destruction in his wake. His ambition knew no bounds, and he would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. Villages burned, families torn apart, lives destroyed. The land was scarred by the horrors of war, the cries of the innocent echoing through the night. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of courage, loyalty, and the very meaning of honor. A battle that would determine the fate of their world, a clash between the forces of light and darkness, of hope and despair. In the end, only one would emerge victorious, and the legacy of their struggle would be remembered for generations to come. The battlefield thundered. The ground beneath the warriors' feet trembled as if the earth itself was recoiling from the violence. The sky, once a serene blue, was now obscured by a thick veil of smoke and dust, turning the day into a grim twilight. Steel met steel in a symphony of death. The clang of swords, the dull thud of axes, and the sharp twang of arrows created a cacophony that echoed across the plains. Each clash was a desperate bid for survival, each parry a dance with death. The air was thick with the stench of sweat, blood, and fear. The cries of the wounded and the dying mingled with the shouts of their living, creating a haunting chorus that would linger in the minds of the survivors long after the battle was over. Haldor fought with the fury of a cornered wolf, his axe flashing like lightning. His muscles burned with exertion, but he pushed on, driven by a primal instinct to survive. His eyes, wild and fierce, scanned the battlefield for his next target. Each swing was a testament to his strength, each fallen enemy a grim tally in the macabre dance of war. His movements were fluid, almost graceful as he weaved through the chaos, his axe a blur of deadly precision. The ground around him was littered with the bodies of those who had underestimated his resolve. Klaus observed the carnage from atop a hill, his cold eyes calculating. He was a man who saw the battlefield as a chessboard, each soldier a mere pawn in his grand design. His lips curled into a thin smile as he watched his plans unfold with ruthless efficiency. He was a master strategist, preferring cunning over courage, manipulation over brute force. His mind was a labyrinth of schemes and counter-schemes, each move meticulously planned to ensure his victory. He took no pleasure in the bloodshed, but he reveled in the power it brought him. His army was a vast machine, its gears grinding relentlessly, fueled by the fear he instilled in his own men. They marched with a grim determination, their faces set in hard lines, knowing that failure was not an option. Klaus's iron will was the force that drove them, a relentless tide that swept all before it. Haldor, despite his valor, saw the futility of their struggle. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered. The enemy's ranks seemed endless, a sea of steel and flesh that threatened to engulf them. Yet he fought on, driven by a sense of duty and honor that would not allow him to surrender. His comrades were cut down like wheat before a scythe. Each loss was a blow to his heart, a reminder of the grim reality of war. The ground was slick with blood, the air filled with the acrid smell of death. It was a scene of utter devastation, a testament to the brutality of the conflict. Despair began to grip his heart, a cold dread seeping into his bones. He could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on him, a crushing force that threatened to break his spirit. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, he refused to give in. His resolve was a beacon of hope in the darkness, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. The sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the blood-soaked earth. The sky was painted in hues of red and orange, a fitting backdrop for the carnage below. As the light faded, the sounds of battle began to wane, replaced by the eerie silence of the aftermath. The cries of the dying mingled with the triumphant roars of Klaus's soldiers. It was a symphony of victory and defeat, a stark reminder of the cost of war. For every cheer there was a sob, for every victory, a loss. The battlefield was a tapestry of human emotion, a canvas painted with the blood of the fallen. It was a defeat that tasted like ashes in Haldor's mouth, a defeat that chipped away at his soul. He stood amidst the wreckage, his body battered and bruised, his spirit weary. The weight of the loss was a heavy burden, one that he would carry with him long after the battle was over. Yet in the depths of his despair there was a flicker of hope, a spark that refused to be extinguished. For Haldor knew that as long as he drew breath, the fight was not truly over. That night, under the pale gaze of the moon, Haldor sat alone, nursing his wounds. The defeat weighed heavily on him, the faces of his fallen comrades haunting his thoughts. He looked around at the remnants of his army, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. He overheard whispers, fragments of conversations about Klaus and his reign of terror. Tales of villages razed, families torn apart, and dissent crushed with brutal efficiency. These whispers were like poison, slowly seeping into the cracks of his loyalty, sowing seeds of doubt. He had been raised to believe in the sanctity of oaths, to fight for his king, to honor his word above all else. But what was the worth of an oath sworn to a tyrant, to a man who brought only suffering and despair? The more he pondered, the more a truth cold and sharp as his axe settled in his gut. He was not fighting for a just cause. He was not defending his people. He was a pawn in Klaus's game of conquest, a tool of oppression. The next morning, Klaus summoned Haldor. The grand hall was filled with an eerie silence, the kind that precedes a storm. Haldor, a seasoned Viking warrior, entered with a sense of foreboding. He had faced many battles, but this felt different. The air was thick with tension, and the eyes of the court were upon him. The Viking warrior stood tall, his face an impassive mask, hiding the turmoil that raged within. His mind raced with thoughts of loyalty, honor, and the path that lay ahead. He knew that this meeting could change the course of his life forever. Klaus, oozing arrogance and false charm, praised Haldor's bravery and offered him a position by his side. His words were laced with flattery, designed to appeal to Haldor's sense of pride and accomplishment. Klaus spoke of Haldor's past victories, painting a picture of a glorious future if he chose to align himself with the ruler. He spoke of power, of glory, of the riches that awaited those who served him loyally. Klaus painted a vivid picture of a life filled with luxury and influence, a stark contrast to the harsh realities of a warrior's existence. He promised lands, titles, and a place in the annals of history. His words were like honeyed venom designed to entice and ensnare. Klaus's voice dripped with a deceptive sweetness, masking the true nature of his intentions. He was a master manipulator, skilled in the art of persuasion and deceit. But Haldor saw through the facade, saw the cruelty lurking beneath the surface, the utter lack of empathy in those cold, calculating eyes. He recognized the danger in Klaus's offer, the trap that lay hidden beneath the promises of power and glory. Haldor's instincts, honed through years of battle, warned him to tread carefully. "Join me," Klaus urged, his voice smooth as silk, his eyes gleaming with a predatory light. He leaned forward, his gaze locking onto Haldor's, trying to gauge the warrior's reaction. Klaus was confident in his ability to sway Haldor, to bend him to his will. "Together, we will be unstoppable." Klaus's voice was filled with conviction, a promise of invincibility. He spoke of grand conquests, of empires built on the ashes of their enemies. The vision he painted was one of absolute power, a world where they reigned supreme. "We will crush our enemies and forge a new empire, one built on strength and order." Klaus's words were intoxicating, a siren's call to a warrior's heart. He spoke of a world where might made right, where the strong ruled and the weak were subjugated. Haldor's grip tightened on his axe. The weight of the weapon was a comforting reminder of his own strength and resolve. He felt the familiar surge of determination, the fire that had driven him through countless battles. But this was not a battle of steel and blood. It was a battle of wills. He looked around at the faces of Klaus's soldiers, their eyes blank and soulless, their spirits broken. These men were shadows of their former selves, hollowed out by fear and subjugation. Haldor saw the cost of Klaus's rule, the price paid by those who had fallen under his sway. These were not men fighting for a cause, but mere puppets dancing on the strings of fear. They moved with a mechanical precision, their actions dictated by the whims of their master. Haldor felt a pang of sorrow for these lost souls, trapped in a web of manipulation and control. "These are not your people," Haldor stated, his voice low and dangerous. He spoke with a quiet intensity, each word a challenge to Klaus's authority. Haldor's eyes burned with a fierce determination, a refusal to be cowed by the ruler's threats. "They are tools, weapons you wield without care or remorse." Haldor's words cut through the air like a blade, exposing the harsh reality of Klaus's rule. He saw the flicker of anger in Klaus's eyes, the brief moment of vulnerability that revealed the ruler's true nature. "You do not inspire loyalty, you command obedience through fear." Klaus's smile vanished. The mask of charm and confidence slipped, revealing the cold, ruthless man beneath. Haldor's defiance had struck a nerve, challenging the very foundation of Klaus's power. His eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint in their depths. Klaus's gaze hardened, his expression turning deadly. He was not accustomed to being challenged, and Haldor's words had ignited a dangerous fury within him. He had expected a broken man, a loyal dog eager to serve a new master. Klaus had underestimated Haldor, assuming that the warrior's spirit had been crushed by the hardships of life. But Haldor was not so easily broken. His spirit burned brighter than ever. Instead, he found himself facing defiance, a spark of rebellion that threatened to ignite a firestorm. Haldor stood firm, his resolve unshaken. He was a warrior, forged in the crucible of battle, and he would not be swayed by empty promises and hollow threats. The confrontation between Haldor and Klaus was far from over, and the outcome would shape the future of their world.